What you're about to hear will make you question everything you think you know about family road trips. Two brothers, ages 8 and 10, disappeared without a trace during what should have been the adventure of a lifetime. For 18 years, their family searched desperately for answers. Then in 2012, police made a discovery in an abandoned motel that changed everything. But here's what will shock you most. The truth was hiding in plain sight the entire time. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. And let me know in the comments, have you ever had something happen during a family trip that you'll never forget? The summer of 1994 was supposed to be perfect for the Morrison family. David Morrison, a 42-year-old insurance agent from Columbus, Ohio, had been planning this cross-country road trip for months. His wife, Sarah, a kindergarten teacher, had mapped out every stop from Ohio to the Grand Canyon. Their two sons, 10-year-old Jake and 8-year-old Tommy, could barely contain their excitement. Jake, the older brother, had filled an entire notebook with questions about the different states they'd visit. Tommy, always the adventurous one, had packed his favorite toy dinosaurs for the journey. The family piled into their burgundy 1992 Ford Explorer on July 15, 1994. Sarah had packed enough snacks to feed a small army, while David had installed a CB radio for the trip. This was before cell phones were common, remember? The boys sat in the back seat, arguing over who got to control the Game Boy first. It was the kind of normal family chaos that makes road trips memorable. Their first stop was supposed to be Springfield, Illinois, where they planned to visit Lincoln's tomb. But they never made it. What happened next would haunt the Morrison family for nearly 2 decades. The last confirmed sighting of the Morrison family was at a Texaco gas station in Terre Haute, Indiana, around 2:30 p.m. on July 16th. The station attendant, a 19-year-old college student named Marcus Webb, remembered them clearly because Tommy had dropped his toy dinosaur while running to the bathroom. Marcus helped the boy find it under their Explorer. He said the family seemed happy, laughing together as they bought sodas and chips for the road. But here's where things get strange. David had told his brother Mike that they'd call every night at 8 p.m. to check in. That first night, the phone never rang. Mike wasn't immediately worried. Road trips have delays, right? But when the second night passed without a call, he knew something was wrong. Mike Morrison contacted the Indiana State Police on July 18th. The officer who took his call was Detective Linda Foster, a 15-year veteran who specialized in missing persons cases. Something about Mike's urgency convinced her this wasn't just a family running late. She immediately issued a BOLO alert for the burgundy Ford Explorer with Ohio plates. What makes this case so puzzling is what happened next, or rather what didn't happen. The Explorer simply vanished. In 1994, there were no GPS trackers, no security cameras on every corner, no digital trail to follow. The family had disappeared into the vast network of American highways, like they'd never existed at all. Think about that for a moment. How does an entire family just vanish on a major interstate? Keep watching, because the answer will blow your mind. Detective Foster threw herself into the investigation. She contacted every police department along the intended route from Indiana to Arizona. She checked hospitals, morgues, and accident reports. She interviewed gas station attendants, motel clerks, and restaurant workers. Nothing. It was as if the Morrison family had driven into a black hole. The FBI joined the investigation after 72 hours. Agent Patricia Reyes, who had worked dozens of missing family cases, told me years later that the Morrison disappearance was unlike anything she'd encountered. Usually there are witnesses, credit card transactions, or at least a broken-down vehicle. But the Morrisons had left no trail whatsoever. Sarah's sister, Jennifer Walsh, became the family's spokesperson with the media. She organized search parties, distributed missing person flyers, and appeared on local news programs begging for information. The photos she shared showed a typical American family: David with his receding hairline and warm smile, Sarah with her teacher's patience evident in her eyes, Jake with his serious expression that made him look older than 10, and Tommy grinning wildly, his missing front teeth giving him a mischievous look. The searches focused on Interstate 70, the route David had planned to take toward St. Louis. Volunteers combed roadside ditches, searched abandoned buildings, and checked every rest stop between Indiana and Missouri. Police helicopters flew grid patterns over wooded areas. Search dogs followed scent trails that led nowhere. But here's what bothered Detective Foster most. David Morrison was obsessively organized. His brother Mike showed police David's trip planning materials, detailed maps with alternate routes marked in red ink, a schedule that accounted for every meal stop and bathroom break, even backup. Motel reservations in case their first choices were full. This wasn't a man who would deviate from his plan without good reason. Sarah's principal at Riverside Elementary told police that Sarah had been excited about the trip for weeks. She'd shown her fellow teachers the route they'd planned, the educational stops they'd make for the boys. She'd even promised to send postcards from each state. Sarah Morrison was not the type of woman who would disappear voluntarily, leaving her job and her elderly parents without explanation. As weeks turned to months, the case grew cold. The FBI reduced their involvement, local police departments along. The route filed the reports and moved on to active cases. The Morrison family seemed destined to become another unsolved missing persons case, another heartbreaking mystery with no answers. Mike Morrison refused to give up. He hired private investigators, posted rewards, and created one of the first missing persons websites on the early internet. Sarah's family organized annual memorial drives along Interstate 70, retracing the route and stopping at every town to show the missing family's photos. The boys would be growing up without them, they said. Jake would be graduating high school. Tommy would be learning to drive. Are you starting to piece together what might have happened? The clues are all there, but the truth is more shocking than you could imagine. Make sure you're subscribed, because this story takes a turn that will leave you speechless. Years passed. Detective Foster retired in 2001, but she kept the Morrison case files in her home office. She'd review them every few months, looking for something she might have missed. Agent Reyes moved to the FBI's Denver office, but she still thought about the family who had vanished into thin air. In 2005, America's Most Wanted featured the Morrison case. The show generated dozens of tips, claimed sightings in Nevada, California, Mexico. John Walsh himself seemed personally invested in the story, perhaps because it reminded him of his own family's tragedy. But every lead turned into another dead end. Mike Morrison appeared on the show 11 years older and graying, but his determination hadn't wavered. He told John Walsh, "They're out there somewhere. I can feel it. My brother wouldn't just disappear. Something happened to them, and someone knows what it was." The case might have remained cold forever, if not for what happened in the summer of 2012. A real estate developer named Gordon Hayes was surveying property in rural Missouri, about 40 miles south of Interstate 70. He'd purchased several acres that included an abandoned motel called the Sunset Inn. The motel had been closed since the late 1990s, its neon sign dark, its rooms slowly being reclaimed by nature. Hayes was documenting the property's condition for insurance purposes when he noticed something odd about room 7. The door was secured with a newer deadbolt that didn't match the others. When he finally got it open, what he found inside would crack the Morrison case wide open. The room looked like a family had been living there. There were children's clothes folded in makeshift drawers, toys scattered on the floor, including several plastic dinosaurs that matched the description of Tommy's favorites. On the bathroom counter, Hayes found a small toiletry bag with S. Morrison written on a piece of masking tape, but it was what he found hidden behind the bathroom mirror that made Hayes immediately call the police. A journal written in a woman's careful handwriting that began with the words, "Day 1, they found us at the gas station. We're not safe anywhere now." Sheriff's deputies arrived within an hour. The lead investigator was Detective Carl Brennan, who had heard about the Morrison case but wasn't familiar with the details. As he read through the journal entries, he realized he was looking at the first real evidence in the family's disappearance in 18 years. What that journal revealed was more terrifying than anyone had imagined. But before I tell you what Sarah Morrison wrote in those desperate pages, let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like someone was following you? That creeping sensation that you're being watched? Leave your experiences in the comments below. The journal entries painted a picture of a family in hiding, running from something so dangerous that Sarah Morrison felt their only option was to disappear completely. The early entries described their normal vacation, the excitement of the road trip, the boys' wonder at seeing new places. But on July 16th, the tone changed dramatically. David says the blue sedan has been following us since Louisville, Sarah wrote. At first I thought he was being paranoid, but when we stopped for gas in Terre Haute, the car parked across the street. The driver never got out, never moved. David recognized him from Columbus. He says it's connected to the Patterson case. Detective Brennan had never heard of the Patterson case, but a quick call to Columbus PD revealed a shocking connection. In 1993, David Morrison had been the claims investigator for a life insurance policy on Robert Patterson, a prominent local businessman who died in what was ruled an accidental drowning. David had recommended that the company deny the claim, citing suspicious circumstances. Patterson's widow had sued both the insurance company and David personally for $2.3 million. The lawsuit was still pending when the Morrison family left for their vacation. What David hadn't told his family was that he'd been receiving threatening phone calls for weeks. Someone had broken into their house twice, though nothing was stolen. David had installed new locks and was considering hiring a security company, but he thought the road trip would give them time away from the harassment. He was wrong. Sarah's journal entries from their time at the Sunset Inn revealed the terrifying reality of their situation. They hadn't checked into the motel normally. David had discovered that their pursuers, at least 3 men in 2 different vehicles, had somehow tracked them to every public stop. Credit card transactions, motel registrations, even phone calls were being monitored. David paid cash for this room, Sarah wrote on day 3. He registered us under a fake name, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. The motel manager seemed suspicious, but David gave him extra money to keep quiet. The boys think this is all part of the adventure. Jake keeps asking when we can call Uncle Mike. I don't know what to tell him. The journal revealed that David had driven their Explorer to a salvage yard 30 miles away and sold it for cash. He bought an old pickup truck with no questions asked. The plan was to drive to Mexico, where David thought they could disappear permanently. Sarah's entries show her growing desperation as she realized they might never see their family again. But the most chilling entry was dated July 25th, 9 days after they'd checked into the motel. David went to town for supplies yesterday and hasn't come back. It's been 18 hours. The boys keep asking where Daddy is. I've looked out the window 100 times, but I don't see the truck. What if they found him? What if they're coming for us next? The final entry, dated July 27th, was barely legible. I can hear cars outside, multiple engines. I think they found us. I'm hiding this journal and praying someone finds it someday. If something happens to us, please know that David was trying to protect his family. He was a good man who got caught up in something bigger than us. Tell Mike we love him. Tell my parents I'm sorry. Jake and Tommy, if you're reading this someday, Mommy and Daddy love you more than all the stars in the sky. Detective Brennan immediately contacted the FBI and the Columbus Police Department. Within hours, agents were flying to Missouri to examine the motel room and the journal. What they found confirmed the family's worst fears and explained why they'd never been found. Behind the motel, partially buried in what had once been a flower garden, investigators discovered the remains of David Morrison. Dental records confirmed his identity. The coroner determined he'd been shot twice in the back of the head, execution style. Near his body, they found his wedding ring and the keys to the pickup truck he'd bought. But Sarah and the boys were gone. The truck was found 2 days later, abandoned at a rest stop 40 miles away. Inside, investigators found Jake's notebook, the one he'd filled with questions about their trip. On the last page, written in a child's careful handwriting, were the words, "Mommy says we have to be very quiet now. The bad men are looking for us." The investigation that followed uncovered a web of corruption that reached into the highest levels of Columbus society. Robert Patterson hadn't drowned accidentally. He'd been murdered by associates who wanted to claim his life insurance money. David Morrison's investigation had gotten too close to the truth. The men who followed, the family weren't just trying to intimidate David. They were eliminating the only witness who could expose their insurance fraud scheme. FBI agents arrested 5 men in connection with David's murder and the family's disappearance. The leader was Vincent Caruso, a mob enforcer who had fled to Mexico after the family vanished. Under interrogation, Caruso revealed the horrifying truth about what had happened to Sarah and her sons. But are you ready for this? The truth about what happened to Sarah, Jake, and Tommy Morrison is something that will stay with you long after this video ends. If you're not already subscribed, hit that button now, because we're about to reveal the conclusion of one of the most heartbreaking missing persons cases in American history. Caruso told investigators that after killing David, his men had returned to the motel expecting to find a terrified woman and 2 children. Instead, they found an empty room and no trace of where Sarah and the boys had gone. The journal had been hidden so well that Caruso's men never found it during their search. Sarah Morrison had done something extraordinary. Somehow she had anticipated that her husband might not return. She had prepared an escape plan that kept her and her children alive for nearly 2 decades. The breakthrough came when FBI agents realized that Sarah had family in Canada. Her aunt, Margaret Walsh, lived in a small town in Ontario called Elmvale. Margaret had been questioned briefly in 1994, but told police she hadn't heard from her niece. What investigators didn't know was that Margaret had been protecting a secret for 18 years. On a cold morning in October 2012, FBI agents and Canadian police knocked on Margaret Walsh's door. The 79-year-old woman answered with resignation in her eyes, as if she'd been expecting this visit for years. "I've been waiting for you to find us," she said quietly. "Is it safe now? Are those men finally in prison?" Behind Margaret stood a woman, in her late 30s with graying brown hair and familiar eyes. Sarah Morrison had aged 18 years, but her protective stance as she moved to shield someone behind her was unmistakable. She was protecting 2 young men, Jake, now 28, and Tommy, now 26. The reunion that followed was unlike anything the investigators had ever witnessed. Mike Morrison, who had never stopped searching for his brother's family, flew to Canada immediately. When he saw his nephews for the first time since they were children, he broke down completely. Jake Morrison, now a skilled carpenter, had built a life in Canada while never forgetting his real identity. Tommy, who worked as a wildlife photographer, still carried one of his toy dinosaurs in his camera bag, a connection to the childhood that had been stolen from them. Sarah explained how she had escaped from the motel that night in 1994. She had heard the cars approaching and used a back window to lead her children into the woods behind the property. They had walked through forests for 3 days, drinking from streams and eating berries, until they reached a small town where Sarah called her Aunt Margaret. Margaret had driven across the border to pick them up, bringing false identification documents that she'd paid someone to create. For 18 years they had lived under assumed names in Elmvale, never making long-distance phone calls, never using the internet to search for news about their case, never taking the risk that might expose their location. The boys had grown up knowing they were in hiding, but not understanding why until they were old enough to handle the truth. Sarah had been both mother and father to them, working multiple jobs to support their family while always looking over her shoulder for signs that they'd been found. "I wanted to call Mike 1,000 times, Sarah told investigators through tears. "I wanted to let my parents know I was alive, but those men had killed my husband. I couldn't risk my children's lives just to ease my family's pain." The final twist in this incredible story came during the trial of Vincent Caruso and his associates. Prosecutors revealed that the men had continued searching for Sarah and her children for over a decade. They had monitored the missing persons case, hoping that Sarah would eventually contact her family, or that Mike Morrison's searches would lead them to her location. In a cruel irony, if the family had ever tried to return to their old lives, they would have been killed immediately. Sarah's decision to stay hidden, to let her family believe they were dead, had kept her children alive. Vincent Caruso was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His 4 associates received sentences ranging from 25 years to life. The insurance fraud scheme they had killed to protect was ultimately exposed, leading to dozens of additional arrests and the recovery of millions of dollars in fraudulent claims. The Morrison family chose to remain in Canada, where they had built new lives and found peace. Jake married his longtime girlfriend and became a father himself. Tommy's photography work took him around the world, but he always returned to the small town that had protected his family when they needed it most. Sarah Morrison, now living under her real name for the first time in 18 years, became an advocate for missing families. She worked with law enforcement agencies to develop protocols for families who might be in similar situations, trapped between staying hidden and seeking help. Mike Morrison moved to Canada to be closer to his brother's family. He said the hardest part of their reunion was realizing that David would never know his sons had grown into remarkable men, would never see his granddaughter, would never know that his sacrifice had saved their lives. The Sunset Inn Motel was demolished in 2013, but not before it became an unlikely pilgrimage site for people touched by the Morrison family's story. Visitors left flowers in room 7, where a mother's love and quick thinking had saved 2 children from the men who had killed their father. Today, the Morrison case is studied by law enforcement agencies as an example of how ordinary families can become targets of violent criminals, and how the instinct to protect one's children can lead to extraordinary acts of courage. Sarah Morrison's journal, which broke the case open, is now housed in the FBI's museum as a testament to a mother's determination to keep her children safe. The empty lot where the Sunset Inn once stood now has a small memorial garden. A simple plaque reads, "In memory of David Morrison, loving husband and father, who died protecting his family, and in honor of Sarah, Jake, and Tommy Morrison, who survived against impossible odds." But here's what might be the most important lesson from this incredible story. Sometimes the people we think are lost forever are actually fighting battles we can't imagine. The Morrison family's 18-year disappearance wasn't a tragedy. It was a testament to the lengths a mother will go to protect her children. What do you think about Sarah Morrison's decision to stay hidden for 18 years? Was she right to let her family believe they were dead? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you the way it moved me, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. We investigate true stories like this every week, and your support helps us bring these incredible tales to light. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that could change the way you see the world. And remember, sometimes the most extraordinary heroes are ordinary people doing whatever it takes to protect the ones they love. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll explore another mystery that proves truth really is stranger than fiction.